Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 1111 Matrix Code Revealed. As always, I'm your host, Garrett King. In today's episode, we're going to look at an incredible Bible code matrix that I have discovered, and I have to say that it is probably one of the most extraordinary discoveries that I have ever come across in this journey with this 1111 matrix code. And what better day than today, November 11th, 11/11, to release this video. Folks, just when I think that nothing else can surprise me, I am proven wrong. I think this Bible code matrix that I'm going to show you guys today is really going to shock a lot of you. And it could very well upset the church if any part of this code is true. Now, when we get through to a certain point, you're going to see what the odds of this Bible code matrix appearing in the Bible, what the odds of it is. And the number is so astronomically large that I don't even know how to verbally say the number in its completion. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a few minutes. So, without further ado, let's just jump right into this. Let's go. Okay, so what you're seeing on screen is the actual Bible code matrix that I found. Now, what makes this extraordinary is a multitude of things. What it says, what the odds of it existing in the Bible are, and the fact that many of these phrases and words are literally laying right on top of one another. And many of them are reading one way, and when you read it the other direction, it says something completely different, but in total relation to the entire Bible code matrix itself. I think this is just truly going to really, really blow your minds. I've been working on this Bible code matrix for well over a week and a half now, and as it has developed, I have just been amazed at what this says, and it's just extraordinary. It truly is. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So the very first phrase, actually, before I go any further, let me just say that I'm going to hide myself throughout the rest of this video until the very end. because I need the entire screen real estate in order to do this presentation for you guys. So from this point forward, you won't see my face on screen. You'll just hear my voice. Okay? So let's go through this. Okay, the very first phrase was found right here. Okay? And the arrow is showing you the direction in which it is being read. Okay? So it starts with this letter up here at the top and goes all the way down to this letter here at the end of the arrow. So everything that is encompassed in the red outline. Now, one of the things I want to explain is the Bible code matrix works by removing all spaces and all punctuation from the original text of the Torah, the Hebrew text of the Torah. As we all know, the Hebrew Bible is to be read from right to left, okay? As you can see on screen, no phrase in this matrix appears horizontally. So nothing in this Bible code matrix appears naturally in the text of the Hebrew Bible, okay? That's another extraordinary, actually fascinating element of this matrix. Now, as you can see, there is no skip between any of the letters. So this took a lot of decoding. But this portion right here, this phrase that you're seeing right here, to be written down would look like this. Okay? With all of the appropriate spaces between words. The translation of this portion of the matrix is the firstborn father came. Okay? The firstborn father came. Let's go to the next one. Okay. So as you can see, the exact same letters are selected. However, it's now reading from the bottom up. And you're going to see what I mean when I say that these phrases being read one direction and then being read the other direction relate to one another. Okay? So this portion, reading the other direction, when written down, would look like this, with all of the appropriate spaces. And as you can see, every single letter is used, but there's multiple spaces through this. The translation of this is he came here. Okay? So think about that. We have the firstborn father came. He came here. All right? Let's go to the next one. Okay. As you can see, it's literally using letters in the exact same line as all of this text up here. It's 4 letters. And this is going to describe how he came here. Check this out. So with this being written down, it would look like this. Okay, no spaces between the letters. The translation is in a vehicle. In a vehicle. The firstborn father came. He came here in a vehicle. Interesting. And as you can see, it's being read from the bottom up. All right. The next phrase is found right here. Again, being read from the bottom up It's still in the exact same line as all this previous text, but now we have 3 additional letters in front of in a vehicle. This is how it would look written down. So we have a letter, a space, a letter, a space, a letter, a space, and a word. The translation: DNA in a vehicle. DNA in a vehicle. You're going to see that this matrix is literally telling a story. Not only is it telling a story, it is rewriting an already existing story, which is the story of our creation. Let's continue. Okay, the next phrase was found right here. Again, it's being read from the bottom up. Written down, it would look like this. The translation is this: the DNA fragment. Okay? The DNA fragment. I want you to think about these phrases as I'm going through and revealing this to you. And then once we get through them all, we'll go back through it again and I'll tell you what I think it's telling us, if you don't already figure it out as we go through it. Okay. The next phrase, lo and behold, is found in the exact same spot and being read the exact same direction from the bottom up. There's no additional letter. There's no subtraction of a letter. However, when written down, it would look like this. Now, I want you to pay attention to this area right here. What is the difference between this area and this area? Nothing more than a space between the letters. By adding a space between this letter and this letter, the translation from the DNA fragment becomes, and this will blow your mind. It blew mine. But check this out. So simply adding a space will change the translation of this from the DNA fragment to the Hebrew Bible. This is not a joke, folks. When I'm through, I'll go to Google Translate and literally copy and paste the DNA fragment in, add a space, and show you how it instantly transforms that phrase to the Hebrew Bible. All right, let's go on. The next phrase is found right here, and it's being read from the top down. Written down, it would look like this, with all the appropriate spaces in between. And when translated, it says this: he is a foreigner. Okay? He is a foreigner. Pretty strange statement. But check this out. The next phrase is found directly underneath it, and it's being read from the top down, same direction as the arrow. And when written down, it would look like this, with the appropriate spaces. And translated, it would read, and we are not. Okay? And we are not. He is a foreigner, and we are not. Let's keep going. So the next phrase was found right here, okay? And it's reading from the top down. When written down, it looks like this, okay? And again, being read from the right to the left. And when translated, it reads in the light of light, okay? In the light of light. The next phrase is all of the letters here in the red, or surrounded by the red bounding box. And it's being read from the bottom up. Okay, so the exact same letters that were in the light of light with the addition of 2 additional letters. When written down with the appropriate spaces, it looks like this, reading from right to left. And when translated, it states, "We saw that there were 2. We saw that there were 2. So in the light of light, we saw that there were 2. Okay? There were 2 what? Well, you're about to find out. The next phrase, this is actually not even a phrase, it is a name. Okay? It's reading diagonally in this direction. So it starts with this letter, this letter, this letter, and this letter, the one that's in red. It's a 4-letter word. When written down, it looks like this. And when translated to English, it simply says Yahweh. Okay? And Yahweh, the way that it would be written in Hebrew, without any vowels. Now think about this, folks. Think about this for just a moment. In the light of light, we saw that there were 2. The first one is Yahweh. Okay? Keep that in the back of your mind for just a moment. The next phrase is found directly under Yahweh. In fact, it's directly under the first letter that makes up Yahweh. It's reading from the top down, and it's this entire portion in blue. When written down with all the appropriate spaces, it would look like this. Okay? Again, reading from right to left. When translated, it states, "His name was with his people." Okay? His name was with his people. Interesting. Now the second name. And yes, there is an additional name. It's found right here. And again, it's reading diagonally from this letter up. And it's each letter that's in pink. When written down, it would look like this. And when translated, it simply says Asherah. Asherah. Okay? If you have never heard of Asherah, I'm going to tell you who she is in just a little bit. The next phrase is found directly underneath her name. It's right here. And it's reading from the top down. When this is written down with all the appropriate spaces, it looks like this. And the translation is Mother in the Day. Mother in the Day. All right. The next phrase is found directly next to it. It reads from the top down. When written down with all the appropriate spaces, and in fact, I believe this one doesn't have any spaces between the letters. Okay? So, no spaces whatsoever. Translated, it reads, in Israel. In Israel. Okay? Asherah, Mother in the Day in Israel. If this isn't blowing your mind yet, folks, just hang on to your shorts. The next phrase was found over here. It reads from the top down, and it says something really bizarre and unique and cool all at the same time, okay? When this phrase is written down with all the appropriate spaces, it would look like this, and the translation would be, pay attention to the meaning. Pay attention to the meaning. What does that mean? We'll get to it here in a few minutes. The next phrase is found right next to it. It's the whole entire portion here. It's an entire sentence. Many of these are. And it's reading from the top down with all the appropriate spaces. When written down, it would look like this. And the translation is, after all, you have been identified in the Bible. Think about it. It's not referring to, when it says you, it's not talking to me personally. It's talking to every single one of us. Every single one of us. Let's go on. The next phrase was found up there in the left-hand corner. It starts with the very last letter that makes up Yahweh and reads from the top down. When translated, it says, when written down, it would look like this with the appropriate space. And when translated, it simply says, I will guide you. I will guide you. All right. The last phrase that was found in this matrix, all of this blew me away, but this one really sent it straight to the core of my being, because it appears like a signature, and it definitely let me know that I was on the right track. The phrase appears, and it's not even a phrase, you'll see in just a moment, but it appears right there. It reads from the top down. When written down with all of the appropriate spaces, it would look like this. And when translated, it simply says, and folks, it may give you chills. It did for me. It simply says 11.11. 11.11. I was floored. Totally floored. You see what I mean when I say it's almost like a signature mark in this entire matrix. Okay. Now let's look at this again. Okay. So there's the matrix sitting there all on its own. The first phrase in Hebrew, the translation, the firstborn father came. He came where? Well, there's the Hebrew phrase, the translation, he came here. He came here. How did he get here? He came in a vehicle. Okay? He came in a vehicle. The next phrase in Hebrew, in the translation, DNA in a vehicle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this one more time, allow everything to appear on the screen, and then we'll read back through it. So the next phrase, the DNA fragment. Okay, the DNA fragment. The next phrase is the Hebrew Bible. And again, literally adding one space changes the DNA fragment to the Hebrew Bible. It's not a joke. Any one of you can go to Google Translate and put these letters in. And in fact, I will do it at the end of this video and show you that the translation is accurate. The next phrase, he is a foreigner. He is a foreigner. The next phrase, and we are not. And we are not. The next phrase, in the light of light. The phrase after that, we saw that there were two. The phrase after that is a name, Yahweh, God. Think about it, folks. It's Yahweh. And his name was with his people. That was the following phrase underneath the name Yahweh. The next name, because it says there were two. Okay, first was Yahweh, and now we have Asherah. Asherah. And it states that Asherah was mother in the day. In Israel. Okay? Mother in the day in Israel. Underneath her name, Mother in the day and in Israel was underneath her name. Way off over here to the left is where it says pay attention to the meaning. Pay attention to the meaning. Because After all, you have been identified in the Bible. And then we get the phrase, I will guide you. I will guide you. And then the number that has been driving this from the very start, all of my videos talk about this number. I have been seeing it ever since I got married and legally changed my name. This all began. I've been seeing this number for an incredibly long time. 1111. Okay. Let's read back through this and talk about it for just a moment. So the firstborn father came. He came here. He came here in a vehicle. Now, after that, we get DNA in a vehicle. Now, this could either represent that he brought DNA in a vehicle, or he simply was the DNA in the vehicle. And then it talks about the DNA fragment. Okay? Now, what does fragment mean? When you have something that is whole and you split it off into multiple parts, they become fragments of the whole. Okay? When you stop and think about it, when a man and a woman have a child, the child is essentially they are their own whole person, but they are also a fragment of their mother and father. And then simply changing the spacing of one letter, the DNA fragment becomes the Hebrew Bible. Now, I was watching a video over the weekend in which they were literally discussing how the Hebrew language was the DNA of creation. Now, think about that. Think about that when I have shown in past videos where at the very beginning of Genesis, where it says, in the beginning, God created, and then there is a 2-letter word there. The first letter is the first letter of the alphabet, and the second letter is the last letter of the alphabet, suggesting that in the beginning, God created what first? He created the alphabet, the DNA of creation. Okay? It is the code that I've been talking about, the code that makes up everything in our existence. Okay? Because when you think about it, by creating the alphabet first, the code, from that code, he was able to create everything else because he had every single tool at his disposal in which to name everything that was being created. Okay. And then it's simply telling us that he is a foreigner. Okay? What does that mean? He is a foreigner. That simply means he came from somewhere else. And we are not foreigners, which means we originated here. Okay? He came from somewhere else. But we did not. We originated here. And then it states, in the light of light, we saw that there were two. Okay? This phrase, in the light of light, to me, that means that it's almost like an epiphany of sorts. That like it's like a light bulb going off, like when you think about it, it's the ultimate of light, the realization that there was not one, there was two. Yahweh, whose name was with his people, and Asherah, who was the mother in the day in Israel. And then it's simply telling us to pay attention to the meaning. Pay attention to the meaning. After all, you have been identified in the Bible. Now, if you recall, it was either my last video or the video before that, I stated that it is believed that every person on this planet that lived, is living now, and will live in the future is named in the Bible, in the original Hebrew text of the Bible. And not just their name, but details upon details upon details about their very lives. Okay? Now, when I was going through and decoding this, I asked my brother, well, let me step back for just a second. This matrix that I found is built off of a matrix that Michael Drosnin found. However, in his matrix, he only found 3 phrases. One was DNA in a vehicle, which he claims that it states DNA was brought in a vehicle. Now, when I did the translation, it just simply said DNA in a vehicle. Now, maybe it's just implied that it said was brought. That's possible. Now, the other phrase that he found was your seed. The reason I do not have that included here is simply because the phrase your seed was running horizontal, which means it was a natural phrase in the Bible. Okay? We can't say that it's impossible that phrase was there because it's just naturally written there. However, it does tie into this because we're talking about DNA. We're talking about the creation. And in fact, every single portion of this matrix was found in the book of Genesis, the creation story. And I'm super surprised. I am really super surprised that Michael Drosnin did not find all of this other information because it was literally right there in front of his face. Literally, I mean, it's the exact same matrix that he found. Now, the other portion that he found, because I said he found 3 phrases. So he found one that he claims said DNA was brought in a vehicle. He found one that said your seed. And then there was another portion that said your seed in a vehicle. Now, the portion that he said, your seed in a vehicle was again running horizontally. That's why I did not include it. But it was using the same word right here. This word in a vehicle actually appears in the Bible running horizontally. Okay? But the unique part of this matrix that I'm showing you is that it's running vertically. Okay? It's running vertically straight up and down, which means it did not appear naturally in the Bible. So, as I was about to say just a moment ago, as I was going through and finding all of this information, I hadn't gotten to these last two yet. I had only gotten to this point where it said, after all, you have been identified in the Bible. And I said to my brother, it's like I'm being guided, because I said to my brother, it's like, why do you think Michael Drosnin didn't find this same information when it's literally sitting right here staring him in the face? And my brother just simply said, well, maybe he wasn't meant to. I don't know. And I said to my brother, I was like, well, I said, it truly almost begins to feel like I'm being guided to find this information. And he said it would appear to be so. So we got off the phone, and then later that night, I found the phrase up here. I will guide you. And I simply said out loud, you have got to be fucking kidding me. And then, even more shockingly, is when I found 1111 encoded right here. Again, folks, what are the chances? What are the chances? Because this is not how you would typically write 1111. And in fact, when I started typing this in, I simply did it letter by letter with no spaces. Then I began to play around with the spacing just to see how it would change the translation. Through the entire thing, none of it made any sense until I arrived at this particular spacing. And lo and behold, 1111 appeared on the screen in the translation box. And I'm going to show you all this here in just a little bit. So again, we have the firstborn father came. He came here in a vehicle. There was either DNA in the vehicle or he brought DNA with him. We're getting the DNA fragment, which strangely becomes the Hebrew Bible with the changing of one space between a letter. We're getting the statement, he is a foreigner and we are not, suggesting he came from somewhere else. We were seated here. We were born here. And in the light of light, we saw that there were two. Not one, but two. Yahweh, whose name was with his people, and Asherah, mother in the day. Now, think about that. Mother in the day. What does that mean? Well, she was the mother back in that day in Israel. It's no different than when, we say, well, back in the day, blah, blah, blah. She simply was mother in the day in Israel. And it is telling us to pay attention to the meaning of all of this. Because after all, it says you, but I do not believe that for a second that when it says you, that it is talking to me personally. It is talking about every single one of us. Because after all, we have all been identified in the Bible. We are part of that code. We are a part of the Creator. And it simply states, I will guide you. And then 11:11. Okay, let's move on. So, who was Asherah? It is believed by many that God had a wife, and her name was Asherah, whom the book of Kings suggests was worshipped alongside Yahweh in his temple in Israel. Think about that, folks. We just saw where it simply said mother in the day in Israel. And now there are scholars coming forward suggesting or saying that God had a wife and her name was Asherah. And she was worshipped alongside Yahweh in his temple in Israel. Now, in 1967, Raphael, and I have no idea how you say his last name. I don't know if it's Patay. I have no idea. But he was the first historian to mention that the ancient Israelites worshipped both Yahweh and Asherah. Okay? And this is supposed to be an engraving carved into stone of Asherah. Now, hopefully you're picking up on what this is suggesting. If God had a wife and God was our creator, would it not make more sense that we were born from the mother and the father? Think about it. It's far more believable that two beings came together and gave birth to mankind. It's far more believable than one being taking dirt and clay and molding it into the shape of a man and breathing into his nostrils to give him life. To me, that's a fantasy. That's a fairy tale. It's far more believable that a male and a female being created us from their own DNA, from their own code. Now, it's quite possible that what we know of God at one point being nothing but consciousness, okay? That we are all part of the same consciousness. Now, this consciousness would be neither male or female. But the consciousness, okay, became... So think of it in this way, okay? The consciousness, somehow, we don't know how, okay, first creates the alphabet, creates the code in which then everything else came out of, okay? And then simply the consciousness inserts itself into its own creation in the form of a living being named Yahweh. And because consciousness is neither male nor female, it had the ability to become both so that it could experience its own creation and then give birth so that its new creation could then go on and continue to experience the creation over and over and over again. Think about it. Let's go on. The odds, folks, of this matrix appearing in the Hebrew Bible, the matrix that I just showed you a few moments ago, the odds of it appearing in the Hebrew Bible are 1 in 4.05183578028 times 10 to the 92nd power. Okay? That's what this asterisk here means, times 10. And the arrow up means to the power of 92, to the 92nd power. That number is so astronomically large that it is suggesting that the odds of this matrix appearing in the Hebrew Bible is impossible. It's impossible. Imagine if those were your odds in winning the lottery, okay? If you only had one chance in 4.0518357578028 times 10 to the 92nd power, you would never, ever win. And if you did, what would we call it? A miracle. A miracle. The number is extraordinary, and it is large. Think about the chances and what that means. Now, every search term presented has an ELS, which is an equidistant letter skip, of 454, with the exception of two words, Yahweh and Asherah. 452 for Yahweh and 906 for Asherah. Okay? Interesting that Yahweh and Asherah were the only words or names that appear in the matrix diagonally. Okay? They're meant to stand out. Everything else had an equidistant letter skip of 454, except the two names of our creators, Yahweh and Asherah. Now, the Gematria values of 452, 454, and 906. That's what we're going to look at next. So the Gematria values of 452, that was the skip of Yahweh, okay, the equidistant letter skip of Yahweh. That means that from the first letter to the next letter, there were 452 letters in between before it arrived at the next letter. Okay? In Gematria, 452 is the value of the following phrases. Becomes the Lord. Becomes the Lord. Okay? The consciousness became flesh and became the Lord. We also get the phrase, the perfected man. We also get the phrase, God-coded person. Okay? God-coded person, meaning God coded us, people, from his own DNA. He was also older than time. And we get the phrase, the God particle. What are the chances, folks? What are the chances? You really have to stop and think about this. Now the next number, 454, that was the equidistant letter skip of all the other phrases that we saw, except for Yahweh and Asherah. So in Gematria, 454 is the value given to the following phrases: the Alpha and the Omega, the Chosen One, Lord of Lords, and Solar Blast. Now, I included that one because I keep talking about a solar flare event in 2058. We also get the phrase, the Lord is come, and lo and behold, calculate a Bible code. Calculate a Bible code. It's exactly what I just did, what I just showed you. And then 906, that was the equidistant letter skip of the name for Asherah. It is the Gematria value of the following phrase or phrases: the beautiful goddess and pay attention. Pay attention. Remember the phrase showing up in the matrix where it said pay attention to the meaning? Pay attention to the meaning. Now look at this. 452 plus 454 is 906. What are the chances? Again, folks, pay attention. Now, 906 plus 906 equals 1812. In Gematria, 1812 is the value given to discovery of information, which is exactly what we're doing. Trust the universe. 11, a heaven dimension. Okay? 11, a heaven dimension. It's also the value given to the question, are there infinite simulations of reality? And it's the value given to God warned you. Decode. Decode. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm decoding the 1111 matrix code and now the Bible codes. Again, folks, what are the chances? Okay, so that was the presentation. As I mentioned, I was going to show you how these translations are accurate. So let me close some of this stuff here. And let's go to Google Translate. Okay, so I won't do all of these, but I just want to show you the most interesting parts of these. So we'll just do a small handful of these. Okay, so this one here, paste it in. As you can see, The translation is the firstborn father came. Okay? Firstborn father came. It's right there in Hebrew. And here's the translation. I simply copied and pasted the text. If you look closely at each letter, you'll see that it's each letter running down to here. Now, the next phrase is using the exact same letters, but running backwards with different spacing. And it tells us that he came here. He came here. Now, one of the more intriguing ones is this one here, where it has the DNA fragment. Let's copy it, paste it in, and as you can see, it says the DNA fragment. I'm simply going to move my cursor over to this section right here, because this is where the space occurs in the next phrase. Watch this, folks. All I'm going to do is hit the space bar one time. It's going to transform the DNA fragment into the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible. Again, not making this up. You can simply see it for yourself. Okay. Now let's go down to where it says, I will guide you. Okay. I'm going to show you something very interesting here. Okay. Paste it in. As you can see, it says, I will guide you. But who is I? Who is I? Okay. This is really interesting because when I was first decoding this, I didn't use the first letter because it was simply using a letter from Yahweh. So I simply started with this letter here and went down. Okay. So I didn't remove it, but I just didn't start with it. Okay. So the translation is exactly the same. I will guide you. But if you notice, it's a lowercase I. Okay? And by hitting a space and adding that letter, it capitalizes the lowercase I to an uppercase I. Okay? It's giving it emphasis. Why? Because look what happens when you remove the rest. That letter alone translates to God. God. It is simply coming off of Yahweh. Okay? Yahweh, I will guide you. Can't make this up. Simply cannot. Now, let's look at this last one here, okay? The 11:11. And let's paste it in. As you can clearly see, it says 11.11. 11:11. Now, when I first typed it in, I did so without any spaces. And it says that I don't even know what it says. I don't know what it's probably not even saying anything. It looks like gibberish. SHIBI capital AHDT means nothing to me. Okay. So as I was going through, and I just began to play around with the spacing between the letters. That's all I did. And simply doing that, it just gives us Q. Okay? Makes no sense. Q. Then I added a space here, and it gave me SH12, whatever the hell this is. I have no idea. Okay. And then all it takes is adding a space between the last letter and the letter before it. And the whole thing, oh, sorry, no, I take that back. Sorry. There's one other space here. Let's jump back. It's the space right after here. Okay. Which then changes it to SH space capital Y space, and then whatever this is. Okay. Again, it means nothing to me. I don't know that it means anything at all. It could, but to me, it doesn't mean anything. I don't know. Then going to the very end and adding a space, it simply transforms the whole thing to 1111. Again, folks, what are the chances? So we are quite literally being told with a very vivid description an entirely different creation story. One that makes far more sense, in my opinion, that we were born of the creators. We weren't molded out of dirt and clay and had breath breathed or, into our noses, as Adam did or was supposed to have had done, giving him life. I mean, to me, that's just, it's a fairy tale. It's a fantasy. Now, what I was saying earlier about, consciousness, essentially consciousness giving birth to itself, that, becoming flesh is merely one idea. The other idea is that two beings simply came here from another planet, possibly, a planet in which possibly they were destroying themselves, much like we're doing here, polluting our air and our water and everything else. And they managed to escape and came here and started over. And they did so with everything they needed to do it. Everything that they needed in order to create a simulated reality that they could further continue their species and keep us, and I want to be careful when I say this, but I'm going to go ahead and use this particular word, but to keep us confined, not necessarily as prisoners. It could be, but not necessarily. But perhaps more like a means in which to protect us. But at the same time, just as could have possibly have happened on their planet, they were destroying themselves, just as we are doing. And maybe that is the reason why the simulation, the program, is designed to constantly reset itself. And why the simulation is speaking to us through this 1111 code, through this 1111 number and 333, and telling us to pay attention to the meaning. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if the reset is, inevitable, it's going to happen no matter what. As it has happened multiple times in the past. I mean, it does tell us to live in love without limit, become united, and he will redeem. Maybe that right there is the key which will end the simulation. If we could all come together as one and become united, then every bit of the consciousness, if we go back to the consciousness idea, becoming flesh, if we could all come back together as one and become united, then the consciousness would become whole again instead of being fragmented. These are just theories based off of the information that, is being received. And it's obviously being received for a reason, folks. It's obviously being received for a reason. Can we save ourselves from another reset? In such a short amount of time. I mean, 2058 sounds like it's a long time from now. I'll be in my 80s. I'm 49. I'll be 50 next year. So we're literally talking 30 some odd years from now. It's not that far away. And 30 years seems like an impossible amount of time to rally everyone on the planet and rechanging the way that they look at the world, the way that we look at one another. Remember, one of the phrases that came up when I first started doing all of this was change the paradigm. Change the paradigm. Change the way we all think. Can we do that in 30 some odd years? We haven't been able to do it yet. I mean, look at all the killing and wars and famine and everything that you can possibly think of that has taken place in the world. And at no point have we ever come together united. Is that time now? Or are we simply up against another reset, resetting the entire simulation back to square one and starting all over until we finally get it right? Yeah. That's where I'm going to leave you guys for this time. This is very deep, very thought-provoking information, unsettling at times, and utterly amazing at other times. But think about it. Think about everything that I've said. Think about what it means, to know that we may very well be getting closer and closer and closer to truly understanding exactly where we came from. And when that day arrives, maybe that will be the catalyst that will allow us to all come together. Because once we do realize that we all come from one single source and that we are all part of one another, then we can truly learn to love one another. Because when you hurt someone else, I know it sounds like New Age BS, but truly, when you hurt someone else, you are hurting yourself because you are part of the same consciousness. We are all equal. We are all one. All right. Until next time, folks, I hope you all take care, and please let me know what you think about this in the comments. I'm sure a lot of you is going to have a lot to say. I'm sure many are going to try to dismiss this because it goes entirely against everything that they believe, against their faith. And that's okay. It's okay. But when you go back and you look at that number, that astronomically large number, and just to show you, it's not a number that I came up with, okay? I want to show you this very quickly before I bail out of here. This is the actual report. And as you can see, I started putting the same exact information that I showed you over here. But I thought it was cooler to kind of create that keynote presentation. So since I'm going to release this on 11/11, kind of want to do something a little special with the presentation. But this number was simply generated by the software itself, okay? And it literally reads 4.0518357578028E, okay? 92, okay? And just to prove that when I say it literally translates to times 10 to the 92nd power, I'm going to copy that number, go over here to the browser, simply paste it in, hit enter, and no results found. Really? It's not what you were showing me the other day. Oh, I see what happened. Hang on. The stupid thing wants to take the E out of it. Okay, so I put the E back in, just as you can see right here in front of the 92. There we go. Okay, so it shows us on a calculator, and it's telling us right up above it, okay, that it gets to the 2.8 as it shows here, and changes this to times 10 to the 92nd power. Okay, times 10 to the 92nd power. It's a large ass number. It's a large ass number. Completely. So, okay. Till next time, folks, I hope you all take care. Enjoy November 11th, 11/11. And until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.